well, about an or so a kilowatt hour. So, run the machine for an hour, and it's a 10 kilowatt machine, it'll cost you 42 cents. 5-year planning period, salvage values we're not going to be concerned about. We have an MRR, and we're going to assume when we use the motor, it's loaded to capacity. Okay, but we don't necessarily use it all the time. And the issue is going to be, well, if I use the motor an awful lot throughout the year, then it makes sense to spend the extra money on the motor because I'm going to be saving a lot on electricity. So it's a trade-off between energy savings and upfront cost of the motor. If I only use it infrequently, well then it doesn't matter. Let's just buy the cheap one because we don't use it much. There's not much electricity savings. So the issue then becomes, well, what range of hours is one preferred over the other? Okay, so we have these motors in the factory. We're going to use them for so many hours per year. So the easiest way perhaps is to say, well, at what point don't we care? What's the break-even usage between the two machines? And then try to decide, well, on what side is our usage for these machines likely to be, which will then lead us to which one we want to choose. Having made that decision, I then want to look at, well, how might the government encourage companies to do the right thing? Where the right thing, of course, is buying the motor that doesn't consume as much energy as the other. And we'll see what different mechanisms there are in the marketplace for this government intervention. Because in the end, we don't want people to waste energy and use inefficient machinery. So, for what range are the costular enhancements to motor A, the energy efficient machine, worthwhile? Well, let's start first of all by building a little model. And the first thing to look at is, well, what is the variable that we're going to define? And I always recommend on a test, define your variable. What is it? What's the quantity? What's the time period? So when 10 minutes later, you've sort of solved your problem, you have to make a recommendation. You have to remember, well, what does that variable really stand for? Well, in this case, it's annual usage in hours. Okay. So I've got this machine, I'm going to use it for X hours per year. Then, let's ask the question, well, what are the costs? Well, these motors happen to be 10 kilowatts, and by assumption, if we're using it, we're using it at capacity. So we're putting in 10 kilowatts to gain 10 kilowatts out if it's 100% efficient. So initially, let's start with efficiency of 100%. So if it costs us 4.2 cents a kilowatt hour, and we're running it for X hours per year, and it's a 10 kilowatt machine, that basically gives us an expression for the cost per year per motor in terms of the usage. Okay, and you want to sort of cancel out the dimensions there. You'll see it's dimensionally correct. We get to a point of dollars per year per motor, which is what we're after. So sometimes making sure that it's dimensionally correct, make sure that you've got the right formulation for it. Now, of course, no motor is 100% efficient. You put energy in, and what happens? Well, you waste it in heat and friction and various losses. And so, if I look at a motor, first thing to look at is to say, well, if it has an efficiency rating of Y, then what that really means is, if it's a 10 kilowatt output machine, then I need to put more energy in than 10 kilowatts, because some of it's going to be dissipated as heat and what have you. And what about if I do this? If I put 10 kilowatts divided by Y into it, then when Y of it is used and the rest of it's wasted, Y times this gives me 10 kilowatt hours. Okay. So I'm going to use a factor, an efficiency factor, of 1 over Y, which really then leads us to these actual costs for each machine. Okay. In this case, I've got two components of cost. Remember, this is an equivalent uniform annual cost. So I've got the capital cost, right? And I'm going to spread that out over the planning period, which is like all these other type of problems we're doing. 5-year project. So let's spread the more costly machine, $400, over the 5 years. Okay. And then what's the energy cost? Well, we still pay our energy bill at the end of each year. If I'm going to use it X, I've got that from there for the 100% machine, and I've got 1 over Y, or 1 over 0.85 for the energy efficient machine for my energy cost. So I've got energy cost plus capital cost equals total cost. And what do I have? Well, I've got two equations then, which basically tell me, as a function of usage, what the cost will be. Well, I don't, in the first instance, know how much I'm going to use the machine, so let's just first of all say, well, at what point are they the same? At what point do they cost the same per year? Well, I'm going to let the EUACs equal each other and solve for that, which suggests that if I use the machine for 760 hours per year, both machines are exactly the same from a cost point of view. That's what break-even means. And now the engineering decision is, well, do I use it more or less? So if it's an infrequent machine, what is that? That's 10 hours, 15 hours a week. Okay. So if I use it less than that, well, then I'm going to not want to spend the extra money on the efficient machine. I'm not going to save enough in electricity to make it worthwhile. Therefore, I'm going to go with B. And if I use an awful lot, I'm going to go with A. Okay. So from a pure shareholder economic point of view, this is how we decide which motor to choose. Of course, from a wider perspective, the desirable answer is always A. No matter how much you use it, you want to conserve energy. You want a smaller footprint, carbon footprint. And therefore, if we leave industry on its own, it's not necessarily going to achieve that because there's withholding to the shareholders. Government has to get involved. Think about the different mechanisms government might influence companies to do the right thing, i.e., don't even bother with an analysis like this. Go with number A for sure. Well, first one is legislation. Make it illegal for manufacturers to manufacture machine B. Energy inefficient. Well, of course, that's not possible. Well, it's possible, but not likely. Unless it's such a horrible, waste of energy, it has a niche in the marketplace. People are buying it. You can't outlaw the manufacturer of a machine like that doesn't horribly pollute. So these are going to be both legal options. So you have to then go through a backdoor approach to some economic mechanism. Okay. And now have a look at how you might accomplish that. Well, let's look at what the costs are like of both options as a function of usage. Okay. Now remember, A is the energy efficient machine. Okay. Therefore, the more I use it, the more savings, the easier it is to pay for the $100 worth of enhancements to that machine. So I should say, once we use it a fair bit, okay, motor A, the cost per year is less. Okay. Of course, if it's infrequently used, then why spend the money? If I only use it a couple hundred hours a year, then I'm going to go with the expensive one. Okay. Now, how might we get folks to change their mind? Well, really what we want to do is we want to lower the break-even amount to make it interesting to companies, even if they're only going to use it for 100 or 200 hours to buy the right machine, i.e. the energy efficient one. Well, what are the levers that government have? Well, perhaps energy prices. What would energy prices do? Well, we'll show you on the board in a sec, but just think, in terms of where the energy is in this particular equation. Well, it's in the coefficient in front of X. Increase energy prices, it has the effect of increasing the slopes of the line. So think about them being anchored here and shifting up. Well, doesn't the intersection point come down? I.e., if energy costs are higher, it makes sense at an earlier point to buy a more expensive machine to save energy. Okay. And we'll show you that in a second. What about somehow through a mechanism of perhaps accelerated depreciation, increase the tax savings, so the after-tax capital costs go down, or a rebate? Well, of course, that would only be available on motor A. Well, if energy costs stay the same, how does that affect these equations? We'll just think that in terms of motor A, fixed cost, the 133 per year, comes down. Doesn't that shift the green curve down? Red curve stays the same. There's no incentive program for an inefficient machine, which has the same effect. So what we want is government influencing folks by lowering the break-even point. Okay. Now, how might they do that? Well, first of all, let's talk about raising electricity rates. Okay, no one wants to do that, of course, because electricity basically drives the entire economy. And if our rates are higher than other jurisdictions, then industries is going to leave the province and we'll have resulting unemployment. But there's another view that says, well, our energy costs should be all-inclusive in terms of their effect not only on, on the companies that produce it, but on society and the environment as a whole. And then oftentimes this view says, well, energy costs are too low because they do not include the environmental impact of energy costs. And so if you adopt that view, so the government now is looking at ways to lower the break-even. So raising electricity rates would have that effect, as I've suggested. Let's just say electricity rates in Ontario go up by 25%. Okay, well, that's all under provincial government jurisdiction because they indeed control the energy market. It's regulated. So if energy rates go up by 25%, then what happens to the break-even point? Well, it is desirable to basically have a lower break-even point. And in this case, what would happen? Well, I'd have the same equation, but rates are going up by 25%. And the capital cost stays the same. Okay. And similarly for EUAC. This is 0.78 plus the cheaper one. Well, if I do this, it does have the desired effect. The break-even point becomes 603 hours. Which means now it's in a company's self-interest, economic interest, if, well, before this program of raising electricity rates, if you were, let's say, at 700 hours, you'd opt for the cheaper machine and waste energy. Well, if rates are higher, it becomes interesting economically sooner, and therefore, if you were at 700, you're now above the break-even point, and you're going to get the more energy-efficient machine. However, devastating effect on the economy, especially if other jurisdictions that we compete with don't have electricity energy rates that are as high. Okay. So a good idea, but not very practical. Second approach, basically, and this is one that is used quite frequently, is give a rebate. Okay. In other words, need people not to use electricity. And rebates are very popular. Now, what company pays someone not to use their product? Right? I mean, that's sort of unheard of, right? But think about a power utility who has two choices. One, get consumption down so you don't have to produce as much, or build nuclear power plants to basically fund this new generation that's required. Okay. Well, of the two, governments and utilities prefer the let's get consumption down so we don't have to build expensive new plants. So rather than spending money on new plants, they're spending money on rebates, which really flows into the economy for people to buy or renew with environmentally friendly products. Well, how does this work? Well, one, of course, needs a mechanism to, define and certify things as being environmentally friendly and therefore, eligible. For example, for many years, you go to the, the Home Depot or whatever, you can buy a light bulb for 50 cents, or you can buy a light bulb for $10, right? Well, the $10 light bulb, I guarantee you, you will not save $9.50 worth of electricity over its life. It's a good idea. You can use less. But how do governments get you to buy it? Well, it's a mail-in coupon. You buy it, they'll send you a check for $4 or $5. Same thing here from an industry point of view. So how would a rebate work? Well, have a look in terms of this. So on machine A, there's going to be a 20% rebate. On machine B, nothing. Right? Because no one wants to buy this. Okay. Well, again, from a fixed cost point of view, the curve associated with the line, I suppose, with motor A will come down because basically energy costs stay the same. It's just a shift. Well, what would that shift be? Okay. Well, EUAC now, you say A, with the same energy cost, okay, looks like this. I'm sorry, I should say A given B. And now, with a 20% rebate, I'm going to get $80 back. Okay. Now, this can either be a check, or it could be CCA, acceleration, or just a payment. Doesn't matter what the mechanism is, but the first cost present value goes down. The easiest way is to just give people a rebate. Well, this equation now changes. It becomes 0.494 plus 107. EUACB stays the same. And it has a really pronounced effect on what people will do. In that, X now becomes 151 hours. Which essentially means virtually every motor in the factory. Right? Because, I mean, if you're not using it, you know, what's that, 3 hours a week, if you're not using the motor 3 hours a week, you probably don't need it. And so, with the rebate, very, very effectively now, has made virtually every motor in the factory, you know, that's eligible, basically economic to make it energy efficient. It's a very, very powerful way of doing things. And of course, it is either, you know, a transfer of taxpayer dollars to getting people, companies to do the right thing, or it is money that would have been spent on nuclear power plants, or coal-fired plants, or whatever, to basically produce the power that now we don't need. So however you look at it, it has a net benefit. Okay. So very, very useful way of doing it. Any questions? I want to give you an example of U of T, and one that had sort of unintended consequences. Quite a number of years ago, we were using fluorescent tubes, and they were the very old T12 types, which took an awful lot of energy. And the new T8s came out, and the university did an economic analysis, just like we did here, and they said, well, you know, we're not going to save enough energy to make it worthwhile. And in the end, you know, we are a business, right? And so we looked at, well, spending all the money, because there's hundreds of buildings on these replacement tubes, and you had to change the fixtures and the whole work of the ballot. And, you know, we had money sitting in the endowment, the payment was not worth it. So Ontario Hydro and Toronto Hydro comes to U of T and says, we have an incentive program. Okay. And they help pay for relamping the entire St. George campus as a pilot project. And all of a sudden, our number crunchers did the number crunching, and indeed, the rate of return was really great. As you can see, rebates really help. So we went ahead and did the entire St. George campus. And we were successful in, you know, we saw our energy consumption, electricity consumption drop like a stone, which was expected.
These rooms aren't bright.
Sorry?
These rooms aren't bright enough.
Well, I know that's architectural design. Actually, yeah, these rooms here, I'm designing some classrooms for the college, and the standard is 50-foot candles at the desk. These rooms have about 8 or 9. So they're about 20% of the desired standard. So, anyway, we'll have classes at New College Bill to see what you're doing. Okay. If I get them built. I'm opening up the tenders on Wednesday. It's sort of exciting. We've got 6 contractors bidding on about $2 million worth of work, 7 new classrooms at the college. It's been a 2.5-year project. Nothing moves quickly at the university. But on Wednesday, we opened the tenders to see whether or not the bids come back. We have the budget for it to see whether or not we can actually afford what they come back. But I think so, because the contractors are really hungry right now. I think we're going to get a good bid. But anyway, that's Wednesday. Okay, so what was I talking about? So we revamped the St. George campus. And basically, then Hydro came to us and said, well, you know, let's do Arundel and Scarborough as well. And our number crunchers did the numbers and said, well, no, thank you. And well, Hydro came back and said, well, you know, St. George campus was such a success. I said, yes, it was. However, now we have a 20-year supply of light bulbs and ballasts for free. Why would we change things at Scarborough and Arundel? Simply because we have all these spares and the costs are different. And so that was an unintended consequence. And of course, Hydro now, as part of the contract, claims all the old stuff back, so customers can't reuse it to change the economics of inefficient stuff. Because if you've got free replacement parts for the next 10 or 15 years, why replace them? So anyway, I guess we taught Hydro a thing or two, and they changed the contract accordingly. But in the end, UTM and Scarborough did upgrade, but quite a number of years later. Okay. So again, legislation is possible to outlaw certain claims. very difficult if they're not really egregious offenders. We use the backdoor approach, either subsidies or, as we've talked through the Tax Act, making it favorable for companies who are simply looking at it from an economic point of view, making it economically favorable for them to do the right thing. Okay. So sadly, that's the way it often happens. Any questions? Okay, good. Okay, last technique I want to talk about is sensitivity analysis. Okay, with break-even, we've got a variable, and we sort of don't have a sense of what it's going to take on, so we build a model anyway to try to figure out what to do. Sensitivity analysis is a little more, I think, what engineering is about. I mean, we know as engineers what that parameter is going to be, but we're not sure. We're not sure because there are things out of our control, or we're not sure because we're not experts, we haven't had the time to research it. In either way, we've got an estimate, and the issue becomes, well, how much more work should we put into tightening up that estimate? Because work equals money and time. Well, if that parameter isn't very particularly, the model isn't sensitive to that parameter, maybe we've got a good enough estimate. But if it changes ever so slightly and the project's not worth doing, well then indeed maybe it's telling us that we really need to tighten up that estimate. Or if it's out of our control, use some of those techniques we talked about last day in terms of hedging, foreign exchange contracts or something. For example, we have if we're going to bid on U.S. work, and we find that our profitability is truly sensitive to the U.S.-Canadian exchange rate, well, there's nothing we can do about that other than perhaps hedge that foreign exchange, like we talked about the other day, and all of a sudden, our business model is not sensitive to it anymore. So, but again, if it's not particularly, it's only a small portion. For example, if most of our costs are in U.S. dollars, we need U.S. dollars to pay them, perhaps the model isn't sensitive. So we need to get a sense of what to do in that component. This is an example, and I'm going to do a more of a Chapter 6 realistic example tomorrow. So I got to leave some time for the simulation. That I've got a cost study, and here I've got, I guess, two things that I'm not really sure about. Okay? And what I want to do is I want to see what is the probability of this project not being profitable. Well, it could be that, things go very well on both of these parameters I'm not sure about, but things equally well could go horribly bad. Well, what's the likelihood of both these parameters going horribly bad? Well, it's a cost reduction study, and I have a sense that part of my operation is really costing me too much. I've got skills as a manager, you can get that gut feel, but I can't put my finger on it, and I don't exactly know what to do to make it right. And I don't have the time to make it right. Well, what do? I hire consultants who have the time, for a fee, of course, to have a look and advise me as to what to do. Okay? So I've got to feel as to what the savings might be. Good managers have the second sense, what's really the fat in this organization. And so I've got an estimate in terms of savings. In other words, if we take an action that the consultants recommend, assuming it makes sense, we're going to save so much. But I don't know for sure. And similarly, I don't necessarily know what the consultants are going to cost. I'm going to get a fee proposal, but of course, oftentimes that's just for a certain amount of work, and it's always extras. So my first cost of the consulting is estimated, but it could go up, it could go down, but rarely does it go down. So what do I want to do? I want to see, well, is it worth doing? Is this study worth doing? In other words, given my expected savings, which I don't really know where I'm going to get them, and given the estimated cost of the consultants, should I go ahead and undertake the study? Well, how am I going to handle it? Well, it's a two-variable problem, but let's try to get a handle on it from one side, first of all, in terms of simply the savings. Okay. So the more the savings there are, the better the project. Right. So my guess right now is, if we do something, again, I don't know exactly what we need to do, I'm going to save $7,000 a year. But if I'm wrong, and let's say, I'm wrong by, why is the percentage error? Remember, that's what the sensitivity variable so far. If I'm wrong by 50%, well, that's good, right? Because there's more savings there than I thought there was. Okay. So if I look at this sort of break-even line, okay, well, the more I'm wrong to the positive, the better it is for this project. However, if I'm wrong, and I say I'm wrong by, let's say, what is this, around okay, net present value becomes 0. Okay. So this gives me a sense of how sensitive this cost reduction study is with respect to my initial estimate as to savings. Okay. And so if I'm off by 23%, then it's not fulfilled, or 24%. Okay. But I don't know. All I know is 7,000 is my best guess. Well, what about the consultant side of things? Well, here it's sort of going the opposite way, right? If my error is, if my estimate is too low, in other words, y is positive, it's going to cost me more than I thought, more than the initial 20,000. So here, a positive error reduces the desirability of the study because the consultants are going to cost me more. So given, and here, say, given savings assumed to be 7,000, my best guess, the more the consultants cost, the more, of course, it's not worth doing. And, I've never seen a consultant come in less than their bid price, but, if they came in 10% under what they're bidding, then, of course, it's more worth doing. So these things have a sort of a possibility scope in terms of what do I think is likely. Well, I've got two likely estimates, 7 and 20. And then I probably have some gut feel as to, well, what's the range that's we're likely to see? Okay. And let's say, based on my experience, it's probably likely that the consultant's fee, and here it's a little bit of a stretch perhaps, that the consultant's fee could be plus or minus 20%. In other words, in dealing with these consultants on this sort of project, I've never seen them go higher than 20%. Okay. And I've also said they can go minus 20. Well, I'm not sure that would ever happen. And in terms of my savings, well, I'm never wrong by more than 20% either way. So if I do that, I now have a sense of what possibly can happen. Again, given my plus or minus 20 for both parameters is a reasonable assumption. Okay. So now when I look at x and y as being the errors, this area is essentially all of the things that can happen in this project. Okay. For example, over in this top corner here, basically we've got some really favorable savings, okay, and we've got favorable construction, or favorable, I should say, favorable consulting. So the way to handle this now is to say, well, at what point am I breaking even? Well, it's not really a point, it's a set of points. For what x and y am I breaking even? In other words, NPV equals 0. Okay. So now I've got a function of both errors, the error in the consultant's fee and the error in the annual savings, and I have a line that basically cuts through this feasible area. Okay. So all of the things that can happen, x and y plus or minus 20. The project being not profitable or profitable, I break even here. So the issue then becomes, well, if here is break even, on one side it's going to be worth doing, and on the other side it's not. Well, the side where it's not worth doing has two things happening. One, the consultants are really not giving it to me in terms of fees. Right? So I was wrong, but high. Right? And they didn't find any savings. So I was wrong in the 7,000, it's minus 20% or around there left. Okay. So this region here represents both those things going bad in terms of this study. Okay. I.e. consultants fees high and savings low. Okay. But the rest of this is favorable. Okay. And the rest of this basically says, okay, there's enough savings and the consultants fees are reasonable enough to make it worthwhile. If I make an assumption that everything's sort of reasonably probable in this space here of 20 plus minus 20 for x and y, then the probability of this project being favorable is really the area of the favorable results divided by the total area. Or in other words, the chance of this project not worth doing is this little region here. Again, making the assumption that everything's equally likely. Okay. And that is just simply a triangle. So a little bit of trig in high school gives you the probability that this project is unfavorable. So the probability that NT of 8 is less than 0 is what? 4.6%. In other words, this area here is 4.6% of the entire region. Okay. So here we get a sense of, well, we've got our best engineering estimates. We've got a sense of how likely we are to be wrong. We put all that together and to come up with, well, what's the likelihood of this project not being worthwhile? And it's fairly low. So we would probably go ahead with this because, you know, there's only 5 chances out of 100 that this is not going to work. So that's a little way of sort of putting a little structure on uncertainty. Now, what happens to this thing if, like, I think it's a really bad assumption to say that the consultants are going to come in under their $20,000 quotation, right? So to try to understand this, what would that do to the feasible region? What do you think? So let me go back to the definition. So consultants never come in under what they say they're going to. Okay. And so if I look at if I look at the consultants, what I'm saying is that they're never going to come in under budget. Therefore, it'll be $20,000 plus, right? That's the way, that's sort of like the consultants. Well, what would that mean in terms of the feasible area? Sorry. Well, wouldn't that mean, and let's say, X is my first cost error in the consultant's cost. Wouldn't that mean that this region here is not possible? I.e., anything where X is less than 0 means that the consultants are charging me less than $20,000. Not likely to happen. So I might modify this to say, well, the feasible region really is consultants 20,000 or more. Okay. And so I've come now with basically half the region. Okay. How does that affect my probability? Okay. Well, the unfavorable region stays the same, but the favorable region is now half. There's no chance of getting charged less than 20 grand. Okay. And so if now consultant's fee is always greater than 20,000, i.e., X is always greater than 0%, then of course the feasible region halves, and therefore the probability doubles to 9.2%, which is probably a more likely estimate. So they're not going to charge us less than 20 grand. That's what they quote. Okay. So we get a sense of how we want to handle things in terms of uncertainty. Any questions? Okay. Can we just do this course evaluation now? Hopefully we'll have enough time. Do we have a class director? Do we have a volunteer? We'll jump at once. Thank you. Thank you to my rescue. Is this L101 or 102? Does anyone know? Check. This is 101. So this is the time. Sorry.
我们记得是这个102. It's 102.
We're 102. I'm sorry. I'm going to get one wrong here. We're Monday morning. 102. Our TA.
个？
Francis。
第三个啊。
看，我查一下，不信你查一下 Portal， 我记得是 Francis。
我不知道。
因为我查过他的 Office Hour。
胖子帮我填呗。
填毛啊？填他妈随便涂一下就好了。
这是一个星期不到2个小时。反正每个星期都在写着。平均下来差不多34个小时。
他名字挺有意思。
这次平均分60哈，比上次高了点。
再考70。对句。
他妈前面2个为什么考的这么傻逼？
你第一个不是考挺牛逼的吗？
也不就16吗？
第二个傻逼哈。
第二个输。是说有个这样不考了掉7%是吧？
没见过。
那
去年的 exam 没见过。
前几年的看了，就看了去年的。
就看了去年，他就扣是去年的。
啊，他不是有4年的吗？
我没看前面。
是的，太了。
考班序的 happy。大家都在那儿花好久做。